Ever wonder why two people can look at the same situation and walk away with completely different conclusions? It's not that one of them is wrong. It's that both of them are human. Our brains are incredible pattern-recognizing machines. But they're also lazy, constantly looking for shortcuts to save time and effort. Those shortcuts are called cognitive biases, and they shape how we think, remember, and decide without us even noticing. Today, we'll explore 5 of the most common biases you experience without realizing. And once you start seeing them, you'll notice just how sneaky your brain can be. Let's start with one you've probably felt today, the confirmation bias. Imagine you're scrolling through news articles about nutrition. You already believe that cutting carbs is the key to health. So when you see a headline that says carbs linked to weight gain, you click immediately. But when another article says carbs are essential for long-term brain function, you skip it. That's confirmation bias in action. It's the brain's tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. In 2021, researchers from Stanford found that people spend about 36% more time reading articles that support their existing opinions than those that challenge them. It's not malicious, it's comfortable. Challenging our beliefs feels like a threat to identity, so the brain protects itself by filtering reality. The problem? It locks us into echo chambers. We stop learning and start defending. If you've ever argued online and felt that the other person just doesn't get it, remember, they probably think the same thing about you. The best way to break confirmation bias is to deliberately seek disconfirming evidence. Ask yourself, what would prove me wrong? It's uncomfortable, but it's the only way to grow intellectually. Now, let's move to the anchoring bias, a subtle trick your mind plays when it latches on to the first piece of information it sees. Picture walking into a store and seeing a jacket priced at $400, marked down to $150. It feels like a great deal, right? But maybe that jacket was only ever worth $150. Your brain anchored on the first number, so every comparison afterward feels like a bargain. The same happens in negotiations, salaries, even dating apps. In one experiment by behavioral economist Dan Ariely, participants estimated how much they'd pay for a bottle of wine. Before answering, they wrote down the last 2 digits of their social security number. Those with higher numbers consistently offered to pay more, simply because their minds anchored on that arbitrary number. Anchoring doesn't just influence money. It colors judgments everywhere. When we meet someone, our first impression becomes the anchor. Even if we later see evidence that contradicts it, that initial feeling sticks. That's why first dates, job interviews, and even first text messages matter more than we'd like to admit. To counter anchoring, pause before deciding. Ask yourself, what if I didn't know the first number or the first impression? What would I think then? That small reset can save you from big misjudgments. Next is one that feels almost flattering, the illusion of control. We humans love to believe we have more control than we actually do. Gamblers rolling dice harder when they want higher numbers. Drivers pressing elevator buttons after they've already been pressed. Or investors thinking their intuition can outsmart the market. A famous 1975 study by psychologist Ellen Langer showed how strong this illusion can be. Participants who chose their own lottery numbers valued their tickets 4 times higher than those who were randomly assigned numbers, even though the odds were identical. The mere act of choosing made people feel in control. This bias is comforting. It gives us the sense that we can master uncertainty. But it also leads us to overestimate our influence in situations that involve luck, randomness, or complex systems. Think about project deadlines, for example. Managers often underestimate completion time by 30 to 40% because they assume that everything will go as planned. That's the illusion of control at work. The antidote isn't to give up control, it's to recognize the limits of it. Plan for uncertainty. Add buffers, embrace probabilities, and accept that sometimes effort doesn't guarantee outcome. It's not pessimism, it's realism. Let's shift to something deeply social, the availability heuristic. This bias makes us judge how common or likely something is based on how easily we can recall examples. If it comes to mind quickly, we assume it happens often. It's why people think shark attacks are more common than they actually are, even though you're 80 times more likely to be killed by a lightning strike. The media plays a big role here. We see dramatic events repeatedly: plane crashes, celebrity scandals, rare crimes, and our brain mistakes vividness for frequency. In 2023, a global risk perception survey by the World Economic Forum found that people consistently overestimated the likelihood of rare but emotionally charged events while underestimating slow, ongoing risks like climate change or economic inequality. That's availability bias shaping collective perception. You can see it in everyday life too. After hearing about a friend's bad experience with online dating, you might feel like everyone has terrible dates, even if statistics show that over 40% of modern relationships now begin online. Your mind replaces data with stories. To fight this bias, look for base rates, the actual numbers behind your fears or assumptions. Ask, how often does this really happen? Because what's memorable isn't always what's meaningful. Now, for the fifth bias, one that hides in plain sight, the fundamental attribution error. Picture this. You're driving, and someone cuts you off. Instantly, you think, what a reckless person. But if you cut someone off, you probably think, sorry, I was late. That difference is the fundamental attribution error. We attribute other people's behavior to their character, but our own behavior to circumstances. In social psychology, this bias has been replicated for decades. A 2020 meta-analysis found that people consistently overestimate internal causes, like personality, by about 40%, while underestimating situational factors. It's the brain's shortcut for making sense of social chaos. We want the world to feel predictable, so we assume people act from stable traits instead of complex situations. But that quick judgment can damage empathy. Think about a coworker who misses a deadline. You might label them as lazy or careless. Yet maybe they're caring for a sick parent or dealing with burnout. When we slow down and imagine context, our interpretations change. The simplest way to reduce this bias is to add one mental phrase. Maybe there's more to the story. It doesn't excuse bad behavior. It just opens a window for understanding. So let's step back. 5 biases: confirmation, anchoring, illusion of control, availability, and attribution. 5 invisible forces shaping our decisions every single day. They operate quietly, guiding what we read, how we buy, who we trust, and even how we vote. And what's fascinating is how universal they are. And no matter how educated or self-aware we become, we can't fully eliminate them. Even Nobel Prize-winning psychologists have fallen for their own biases in research design. But awareness helps. It's like seeing the strings behind the puppet show. Once you recognize how your mind distorts reality, you gain just enough distance to question it. That distance is where critical thinking lives. Let's imagine a practical day through the lens of these biases. You wake up, check your phone, and read a headline confirming your opinion about politics, confirmation bias. You buy a coffee because it's half off from a price you never would have paid, anchoring bias. You plan your day assuming everything will go smoothly, illusion of control. You worry about flying because of a recent plane crash you saw on the news, availability bias. And you judge the slow barista as careless instead of overworked, fundamental attribution error. That's 5 biases before breakfast. It's not your fault. It's just how the brain manages complexity. But imagine if you caught even one of them in the moment. You'd make a slightly better choice, have a more compassionate thought, or save a few unnecessary worries. That's the power of awareness. In a world overflowing with information and opinions, cognitive biases are like invisible filters. They decide what gets through and what doesn't. And the algorithms we interact with every day, social media, recommendations, search results, amplify them. If you like certain viewpoints, you'll get more of them, feeding the confirmation loop. If dramatic stories grab your attention, you'll see more of those, feeding availability bias. So understanding these biases isn't just personal growth, it's digital survival. It helps you navigate information with clarity instead of being swept along by it. Here's a small mental exercise you can try today. When you catch yourself making a quick judgment or feeling strongly about a piece of information, pause for just 3 seconds. Ask, which bias could be influencing me right now? Even if you can't name it, that pause interrupts the automatic process. Over time, those pauses add up into a calmer, clearer way of thinking. And remember, biases aren't always bad. They evolved for efficiency. If we analyzed every tiny detail before deciding, we'd never move. Biases let us act quickly in a complex world. The goal isn't to erase them, it's to know when they're steering us wrong. Let's revisit each one briefly, but this time, notice how they connect. Confirmation bias keeps us comfortable. Anchoring bias locks our reference points. The illusion of control gives us confidence. Availability bias fuels our fears. And the fundamental attribution error shapes our relationships. Together, they build the invisible architecture of everyday thoughts. And like any architecture, once you see the structure, you can redesign parts of it. Next time you're about to make a decision, big or small, try to ask a few grounding questions. What evidence would change my mind? Am I reacting to the first piece of information I heard? Could luck or chance be playing a bigger role than I admit? Am I judging based on stories or on actual data? And could there be another reason for someone's behavior that I don't see? Those questions sound simple, but they cut straight through bias. They bring the unconscious into the light. And that's the essence of psychological awareness. Not perfection, but presence. Not being right all the time, but being curious about why you think what you think. Because when you understand your mind, you start to understand others too. And empathy, grounded in awareness, might just be the antidote to many of our modern conflicts. If you found this exploration helpful, take a moment to subscribe to Tortoise Brain. It's a small click that helps this community grow, and it keeps thoughtful content flowing your way. As we wrap up, remember this: your brain isn't broken, it's beautifully biased. Every shortcut it takes was once a survival mechanism, but in today's world, survival means something different. It's not about escaping predators. It's about navigating information, relationships, and choices with clarity. So the next time you feel certain, pause. The next time you judge, wonder. And the next time you decide, ask yourself whether your mind is showing you truth or just comfort. Awareness doesn't make you superhuman. It just makes you a little more human.